Welcome to the training for Production Scheduling Cloud. This is the second out of 12 presentations. In this lesson, we will cover how to manage production scheduling organizations, how to define a production schedule and specify its options, and the different ways to launch a production schedule. Let's start with the first topic, defining scheduling organizations. Before you can create a schedule for an organization, this organization has to be added as a scheduling organization within production scheduling. To do so, launch production scheduling from your homepage, navigate to the Manage Scheduling Organizations page, and then add the desired organization. Now let's see how we create a production schedule. After launching production scheduling, use the Create action within the Production Schedules page. In the Manage Schedule Options page, define the schedule scope and other parameters. And once the various fields are populated, use the Submit action on the top right to save the schedule. Now we'll go over some of the key schedule options. There are four main categories of schedule options, and this is also how they are organized in the Manage Schedule Options page. The options in the Scope section determine what data will be read from Oracle SCM Cloud into the schedule. The schedule parameters determine various schedule horizon and fixed time fin settings. The advanced schedule options drive some of the decision-making processes of the underlying algorithms. And finally, in schedule view settings, you can specify some default settings used in the Gantt chart. Key element in the scope definition of a schedule is the organization for which the schedule shall be created. Next, the item catalog and item categories determine which items with their producing work orders shall be included in the schedule. Finally, the schedule horizon influences how far out the schedule will look. This is a schematic of how data for a production schedule is filtered at time of schedule refresh. Work orders at the specified organization, which produce an item in the selected item categories, will be included if they fall inside the schedule horizon. Note that past due work orders can also be included. All relevant item and manufacturing data required by these work orders and their work definitions will be brought into production scheduling. Now let's look into the schedule parameters. Inside the fixed time fins, released work orders will not be rescheduled, but rather considered as they are currently defined in SCM execution. The resource constraint horizon influences how far out resource constraints are enforced, or the other way around, from when onwards they will be relaxed. Next, the release horizon determines which part of the schedule will be sent back to SCM execution in order to update the work orders. The anchor date and time value serves as a reference date to determine the horizon start and fixed time fin start. This is the only required field in this section. The horizon extension has two possible values, rolling and dynamic. The default is rolling. We will talk about these in subsequent two slides. Let's have a closer look at the horizon extension and the fixed time fin settings. If horizon extension is set to rolling, then the fixed time fins is always constant in length. Only the start date changes day to day. The schedule horizon start is the current day's time, which is derived from the time portion of field anchor date and time. Here in this example, this would be 12 a.m. of the current day. On the other hand, if horizon extension is set to dynamic, then the fixed time fence varies in length, depending on the current day of the week. This is for customers who intend to form their schedule, for example, every Thursday until the end of the subsequent week, and then, as time progresses, have the time fence shrink day by day until the next Thursday is reached, at which point it gets extended again. Note that if dynamic horizon extension is used, then it is advisable to use a fixed time fence that is a multiple of 7 days. Later in lesson 9, we will review additional details and also provide a few examples regarding the horizon extension. The advanced schedule options influence the decision-making processes of the scheduling algorithms. The resource allocation priority determines whether more emphasis shall be placed on local changeover minimization or earliest completion time when assigning an operation to one of several alternate resources. Using accelerated dispatching is a flag that can be set in models with only one constrained production stage. If checked, a somewhat simpler dispatching method will be used during schedule generation, which may speed up solve time. Scheduling buckets can be specified and they have to be used in scheduling models in which user-defined attribute sequences shall be applied. Finally, in section Schedule View Settings, you can specify a default resource group, which ensures that only its member resources are shown in the Gantt chart when initially opening the schedule views. The fewer resources there are in this resource group, the faster the Gantt chart will load, since less data is involved. Note that these resource groups have to be set up for a respective scheduling organization within production scheduling. We will go over that in lesson 4. Now the last topic explains how to launch a production schedule. There are 2 ways to launch a production schedule. First, refresh, and second, refresh and solve. While both options retrieve all relevant data from SCM Cloud, the key difference is that refresh does not reschedule the work orders, but instead shows them as they are currently defined in execution. Refresh and solve, on the other hand, recalculates the schedule, resulting in new work order start times or operation resource assignments due to potential offloading. In this demonstration, we now look at some of the activities discussed in this lesson. Adding a scheduling organization, we will create a schedule for an organization, refresh the schedule and view it in the Gantt, and then solve the schedule. Let's navigate to the Manage Scheduling Organizations page. Here we see all the organizations listed that were defined as scheduling organization within production scheduling. It is simple to add a new one. Here, there are 2 organizations that match the filter criteria. Now I defined M8 as a scheduling organization, and I can now use this organization if I wanted to define a schedule for. Let's create a new schedule. Let's give it one of those names here. Here you see that I now have M8 also available as a valid organization to define a schedule for. I will pick M2 though, since there I know I have some data that I can pull over. As part of the scope definition, let's pick an item catalog and a few item categories. Let's keep the schedule horizon as 2 weeks. We use rolling horizon extension, and because the data is further in the future, let's set the date to February 1st. In this sample data set, I want to use scheduling buckets of 7 days. And now I can save the schedule definition. Now I see the new schedule that I created. It has no request performed on it yet. Now we have the option of refreshing or refreshing and solving. Let's do a refresh. You see the status is being updated as it progresses. Now the request completed, and I can open the schedule. Remember, I ran a schedule refresh, which means it brings the work orders over as they are currently defined in the execution system. In this case, those were new work orders that are butting up at daily buckets, and they use their primary work definition. There was no solve process that kicked in, and that would have respected capacity and possibly reassigned operations to alternate resources. Nevertheless, I'm able to view the schedule using the dispatch list and the Gantt chart. Now, if I want to make sure that capacity constraints are respected, I can initiate a solve. While this is running, let's go back up to the schedules page. There we again see the previous request was a refresh. Now I'm running a solve, and effectively this is the same as if I had run a refresh and solve. Now this request completed successfully. Let's again look at the schedule. And now we see that operations were offloaded to alternate resources due to capacity constraints that are enforced. The extruder up here is relaxed resource, so there we still do see overlapping operations. Again, can walk in the dispatch list, identify operations, and now we would be able to start schedule analysis using the various features up here on top of the Gantt chart, as well as using features in the dispatch list. And those are items that we will discuss later on. At this point, I would then also be able to release a schedule. This is again also something that we will look at later on. To recap, in this lesson, you learned how scheduling organizations are defined, what needs to be done to create a schedule. We looked at a few schedule options that have to be specified. And we also learned how to launch and solve a schedule.